The knock on Arthur Owens's door came at 4 a.m. on September 4, 1939, one day after Britain declared war on Germany. When he opened it, two men in dark suits stood in the hallway of his London apartment building, their faces expressionless in the dim light. "Mr. Owens, we're from the security service. We'd like you to come with us for a conversation." Owens, a 40-year-old Welsh electrical engineer, knew this moment would come. For years, he had been passing information to German intelligence, recruited during business trips to Hamburg. The Germans had given him a radio transmitter, taught him codes, and paid him for reports about British military facilities and industrial production. He was a spy, and now MI5, Britain's counterintelligence service, had come for him. But instead of being arrested and executed, which was the standard penalty for espionage, Owens was offered a choice: continue working for German intelligence, but under MI5's control. Every message he sent would be written by British intelligence officers. He would become what they called a double agent, appearing to work for Germany while actually serving Britain. "Why should I help you?" Owens asked the MI5 officers, interrogating him in a safe house in Richmond. "The Germans will pay me far more than you can afford." "Because if you don't, you'll be tried for treason and hanged," replied Major Thomas Robertson, known as Tar within MI5. Robertson was 30 years old, a former Indian police officer who had joined MI5's counter-espionage section shortly before the war. He would become the case officer for many of Britain's double agents. "But if you cooperate, you'll not only save your life, you'll help us win this war." Owens agreed. He was given the code name Snow and became the first agent in what would evolve into the most successful deception operation in military history, the double cross system. In the months that followed, MI5 discovered something remarkable. Every German agent sent to Britain was either captured, killed, or turned into a double agent, every single one. The Abwehr, German military intelligence, and the SD, the SS intelligence service, were completely blind to this. They believed they had an extensive spy network operating throughout Britain, sending valuable intelligence about military preparations, industrial production, and political sentiment. In reality, every report was written or approved by MI5 officers, and the entire German intelligence picture of Britain was a carefully constructed fiction. The man who would organize this deception into a coherent system was John Cecil Masterman, an Oxford historian and former cricket player who joined MI5 in 1940. Masterman was 51, an academic who had spent World War I as a prisoner of war in Germany, where he had learned to speak fluent German and understand German thinking. Now, in 1941, he was appointed chairman of a new committee tasked with coordinating the use of double agents for deception purposes. The committee met weekly at 58 St. James's Street in London, in a room that before the war had been used by a gentleman's club. Masterman called it the 20 Committee, a play on words since the Roman numeral XX symbolized a double cross. Around the table sat representatives from MI5, MI6, the military intelligence services, and the Special Operations Executive. Their mission was to decide what information the double agents should feed to German intelligence, ensuring consistency across all channels and building a coherent, deceptive picture. "Gentlemen," Masterman said at one early meeting, "we have a unique opportunity. Through breaking the Abwehr's Enigma codes at Bletchley Park, we can read German intelligence assessments and verify whether they believe our deceptions. We're playing poker with the ability to see our opponent's cards. If we do this correctly, we can control what Germany believes about Britain for the entire duration of the war. But the system needed agents the Germans would trust implicitly. That's where Juan Pujol Garcia entered the story. Pujol was a 28-year-old Spanish chicken farmer who hated fascism with a passion born from witnessing the Spanish Civil War. In early 1941, he approached the British Embassy in Madrid, offering to spy for Britain. The embassy rejected him. They received dozens of such offers, most from fantasists or German provocateurs. Undaunted, Pujol approached the Germans instead, convincing them he could establish himself in Britain and provide valuable intelligence. The Germans accepted. They gave him money, instructions, a radio transmitter, codes, and secret ink. Then Pujol did something extraordinary. He never went to Britain. Instead, he moved to Lisbon, bought a blue guide to England, a railway timetable, and some outdated reference books, and began inventing intelligence reports from Britain based entirely on imagination. His first reports were comically inaccurate. He described Glasgow dock workers getting drunk and willing to do anything for litres of wine, unaware that Scots drink whiskey, not wine. He reported people in Brighton going to the beach in midwinter, but he also included enough verifiable truth, gleaned from British newspapers available in Lisbon, that the Germans believed he was genuinely in Britain and building a network of sub-agents. By late 1942, MI5 had intercepted Pujol's messages, sent via secret letters to German accommodation addresses in Lisbon, and realized that someone claiming to be a German agent in Britain was actually operating from Portugal. But instead of exposing him, they tracked him down and recruited him. In April 1942, Pujol finally reached Britain, where MI5 gave him the code name Garbo, after Greta Garbo, because his performance was worthy of an Oscar. Under MI5's guidance, Pujol expanded his fictitious network to 27 imaginary sub-agents scattered across Britain, each with detailed backstories and personalities. There was Agent 3, a Venezuelan living in Scotland, who supposedly worked at a communications centre. Agent 4, a waiter at a servicemen's club who overheard military conversations. Agent 7, a Welsh sailor with connections in the ports. None of these people existed, but the Germans believed they did. Pujol's case officer at MI5, Thomas Harris, helped him craft messages so detailed and convincing that German intelligence considered Garbo their most valuable agent in Britain. The Abwehr paid him substantial sums of money, which MI5 kept in an account that would eventually total over $20,000. The key to a successful double agent, Harris explained to colleagues, is not just sending false information, it's building a relationship of trust with the enemy handler. Pujol doesn't just report facts, he creates a narrative, expresses frustration with incompetent sub-agents, complains about expenses, asks for guidance. He makes himself real in the Germans' imagination. While Pujol worked from his London apartment, sending messages via radio and secret ink, other double agents operated in different ways. Eddie Chapman, codenamed Zigzag, was perhaps the most colourful character in the double-cross system. Chapman was a professional criminal, a safecracker who had been arrested in Jersey just before the German occupation in 1940. When the Germans took over the Channel Islands, they found Chapman in prison and recruited him for the Abwehr. They trained him in sabotage, gave him explosives, and parachuted him into England in December 1942 with orders to blow up the de Havilland aircraft factory producing Mosquito bombers. Chapman immediately turned himself into British police, was handed over to MI5 and became a double agent. Under MI5 supervision, Chapman staged a fake sabotage attack on the de Havilland factory. The special effects unit at Pinewood Studios built fake bomb damage, blown-out windows, collapsed sections of roof that looked real from aerial reconnaissance. German planes photographed the damage and Chapman stock with the Abwehr sword. They awarded him the Iron Cross and brought him back to Europe for additional missions, all of which he would betray to MI5. Chapman is a scoundrel, Major Tar Robertson told Masterman, but he's our scoundrel. The Germans trust him completely because he delivered results. When we need them to believe something critical, Chapman can sell it. Dusko Popov, codenamed Tricycle, brought a different set of assets to the double-cross system. Popov was a Yugoslav lawyer and playboy who moved in international society, knew multiple languages, and had connections in neutral countries. The Germans recruited him before the war, believing his cover as a wealthy businessman provided perfect opportunities for espionage. But Popov was an anti-Nazi who immediately contacted British intelligence and offered his services. Throughout the war, he travelled between Britain, Portugal, and neutral countries, meeting his German handlers face to face, which allowed him to deliver detailed verbal reports that seemed too complex to be fabricated. Popov lived extravagantly, gambling at casinos, dating actresses, staying at the finest hotels, all funded by German intelligence money. His lifestyle made him credible to the Germans as a man motivated by wealth rather than ideology. It also, some believe, inspired Ian Fleming's creation of James Bond, as Fleming worked in naval intelligence and encountered Popov several times during the war. In December 1940, the Abwehr sent Popov on a mission to the United States to establish a spy network there and gather intelligence about American military facilities. Popov showed his American handlers a questionnaire the Germans wanted answered, including detailed questions about Pearl Harbor's defenses, ship anchorages, and torpedo protection. This was months before the Japanese attack, and Popov tried to warn the Americans that the questions suggested an imminent attack. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover dismissed Popov's warnings and the agent himself, suspicious of the playboy Yugoslav. The Pearl Harbor attack came, and Popov's credibility with both the Germans and the British was cemented. Not all double agents were willing participants. Lily Sergeyev, codenamed Treasure, was a French citizen of Russian descent who had been recruited by the Germans while living in occupied France. When she learned that MI5 was willing to spare her beloved dog Babs if she cooperated, she agreed to become a double agent. Sergeyev was temperamental and difficult to handle. She resented MI5's control and sometimes threatened to expose herself to the Germans. But her radio reports from Britain were believed by German intelligence, and she played a role in pre-D-Day deception operations, before MI5 finally decided she was too unstable and terminated her as an agent. Roman Czerniawski, codenamed Brutus, was a Polish Air Force officer who had run a genuine resistance network in France called Interallié before being captured by the Germans. Under threat of execution, he agreed to spy for Germany if released, but Czerniawski intended to defect to the British all along, and upon reaching Britain in 1942, he immediately offered his services to MI5. The Germans trusted him because of his proven track record in France, making him valuable for deception operations. By 1943, the double-cross system had achieved something unprecedented: complete control over an enemy's intelligence service. Every report German intelligence received from Britain came from MI5-controlled sources. The Germans had no independent verification, no way to check whether the information was accurate, because they had no genuine agents operating in Britain. The confirmation of this came from Bletchley Park, where British cryptanalysts had broken the Abwehr's Enigma codes. MI5 could read German intelligence reports and assessments, seeing how Berlin evaluated information from their agents. The feedback loop was perfect. Send information through double agents, read German reactions in intercepted messages, adjust future reports based on what the Germans believed or questioned. Masterman and his 20 committee used this advantage not just for counter-espionage, but for strategic deception. When the Allies planned major operations, double agents would feed Germans false information about timing, location, or scale. The success rate was extraordinary because the Germans had no way to verify reports against independent sources. All their sources were controlled. The greatest test of the double-cross system came with Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy, scheduled for June 1944. The Allies needed to convince Germany that the invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy, and to maintain that deception even after the Normandy landings began, keeping German reserves away from the actual battlefront. This became Operation Fortitude, the most complex deception operation in history, and the double agents were at its heart. In early 1944, Pujol's fictitious agents began reporting the build-up of a massive American army group in southeast England under General Patton's command, the 1st United States Army Group, or FUSAG, which existed only in German imagination and Allied deception plans. Agent 3 reported seeing American divisions with distinctive patches moving through Scotland toward ports. Agent 7 described landing craft assembling in Dover. Agent 4 overheard American officers discussing invasion plans. The reports were detailed, consistent, and appeared to come from independent sources, but all originated from Pujol's imagination and MI5's planning, crafted to create a picture of FUSAG preparing to invade Calais. Other double agents reinforced the deception. Brutus reported troop movements consistent with FUSAG's build-up. Tricycle passed information to his German handlers during meetings in Portugal, suggesting that Normandy would be a diversionary attack. The 20 Committee coordinated every message, ensuring consistency and building a coherent false narrative. On June 5-6, 1944, as Allied forces crossed the Channel toward Normandy, Pujol played his greatest role. He attempted to send a warning message to his German handlers that the invasion was imminent. But through carefully timed radio schedules, the warning arrived too late to be useful. Preserving Pujol's credibility, he tried to warn them, without actually compromising the operation. Then, on June 9th, 3 days after D-Day, Pujol sent a 2,000-word message that represented the culmination of 2 years of careful trust-building. His network of sub-agents had observed that FUSAG remained in southeast England, fully equipped and ready. Normandy, Pujol warned, was a diversionary attack designed to draw German reserves away from Calais. The real invasion, Patton's attack with overwhelming force, was still coming. The Germans believed him. Hitler himself read the report and was convinced. The 15th Army at Pas-de-Calais was ordered to maintain maximum readiness. Even as Allied forces in Normandy expanded their beachhead, even as it became increasingly obvious that Normandy was the main invasion, German intelligence continued to warn that Calais was the greater threat. The 15th Army didn't move to Normandy until mid-July, over a month after D-Day, by which time the Allies had built overwhelming force in the beachhead. The deception saved thousands of Allied lives. Military historians estimate that delayed German reinforcement reduced D-Day casualties by up to 50%. The double agents, working from London apartments and country houses, had influenced the outcome of the largest amphibious invasion in history. But the double-cross system's success created a moral dilemma that haunted some participants. Every false report sent to Germany was believed because it was mixed with accurate information. To maintain credibility, double agents sometimes had to provide genuine intelligence that could harm Allied operations. The 20 Committee had to calculate acceptable losses, how much truth to mix with lies to keep the Germans trusting their agents. In November 1943, Pujol reported accurate information about a convoy schedule that resulted in an Allied ship being torpedoed. The loss was acceptable to MI5 because maintaining Pujol's credibility for the coming deception operations around D-Day was worth more than one convoy. But men died because of that decision, and the officers who made it carried that knowledge for the rest of their lives. "We were playing God," Masterman wrote after the war, "deciding which truths to reveal and which lies to tell, calculating the value of human lives against strategic deception. It was necessary, but it was not pleasant. The double-cross system also required extraordinary operational security. If the Germans discovered even one controlled agent, they might suspect others. If they realized their entire intelligence network in Britain was compromised, they would change systems, and the deception would collapse. Every message had to be carefully crafted, every agent's cover story maintained, every interaction monitored to prevent mistakes. This security extended to protecting the secret after the war. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the double agents simply stopped transmitting. The Germans never learned the truth. Captured Abwehr officers were interrogated without revealing that their British agents had been controlled. The entire operation remained classified for nearly 30 years. Arthur Owens, Snow, the first double agent, was quietly paid off and faded into obscurity after the war, his role unknown even to his family. Eddie Chapman returned to criminal life, serving time in prison for various offences, never revealing his wartime service until details were declassified decades later. Dusko Popov wrote memoirs, but couldn't disclose the full extent of his activities while the operation remained secret. Juan Pujol Garcia received both the German Iron Cross and the British MBE, one of the only people in history to be decorated by both sides in a conflict. But MI5 kept his survival secret, allowing the Germans to believe he had died, because other double-cross operations continued after the war ended. Pujol disappeared to Venezuela, living quietly until his role was finally revealed in the 1980s. When he visited England for the 40th anniversary of D-Day in 1984, he received a standing ovation from veterans who finally learned how his deception had saved their lives. John Cecil Masterman returned to Oxford after the war, resuming his academic career. In 1972, despite official opposition, he published The Double Cross System, revealing the operation's basic outline. The book caused controversy. Intelligence services wanted the secret kept indefinitely, but Masterman argued that the historical record should be corrected, that the people who had run the operation deserved recognition. The full files weren't released until the 1990s, when researchers finally gained access to 20 committee minutes, agent files, and operational records. They revealed an operation of staggering scope. 120 German agents identified, all either captured, executed, or turned. Thousands of deceptive messages sent. Major operations including D-Day influenced by controlled intelligence, and the complete manipulation of an enemy intelligence service for 5 years. The double-cross system succeeded because it exploited a fundamental weakness in German intelligence, overconfidence in their supposedly unbreakable systems. The Abwehr believed their Enigma codes were secure, so when British codebreakers at Bletchley Park broke them, the Germans never realized their communications were being read. They believed their agents in Britain were loyal and effective, so when every agent was controlled by MI5, they couldn't imagine the deception. This cognitive bias, the inability to believe that a system that appeared secure was actually compromised, allowed the double-cross system to function for years. Every warning sign was explained away. Convoys that evaded U-boats must have better radar, not betrayed sailing routes. Sabotage that failed must have better security, not double agents. Invasion preparations that didn't match intelligence reports must be diversions, not evidence that the intelligence was wrong. The legacy of double-cross extended far beyond World War II. Modern counterintelligence agencies study it as a masterclass in deception operations. The techniques developed, controlling enemy agents, feeding disinformation through multiple channels, using signals intelligence to verify deception effectiveness, remain relevant in contemporary espionage. But perhaps the most important lesson was about the nature of intelligence itself. Information is only as good as its source, and if sources are compromised, an entire intelligence picture can be systematically falsified. Germany lost World War II for many reasons, but one contributing factor was that for 5 years their intelligence service was feeding them fiction written by their enemies, and they never knew. The agents who participated in Double Cross were not James Bond-style heroes. They were criminals like Chapman, idealists like Pujol, opportunists like Popov, and reluctant participants like Sergeyev. What united them was their willingness to live double lives, to maintain elaborate deceptions, to risk execution if discovered. They were actors in a play where the audience was deadly and mistakes fatal. The MI5 officers who ran them, Robertson, Harris, Masterman, and dozens of others, were not action heroes either. They were administrators, coordinators, case officers who spent their days writing fake intelligence reports, managing agent egos, and attending committee meetings. Their battlefield was paperwork and psychology, and their victory was measured in German decisions influenced, Allied lives saved, and operations succeeded because the enemy was looking the wrong way. When the last double-cross files were declassified, and historians could finally assess the operation's full scope, they reached a consensus. It was the most successful strategic deception in military history. Never before or since has one side so completely controlled an enemy's intelligence service, fed them systematic disinformation, and used that advantage to win battles and save lives. The double agents who misled the Wehrmacht didn't fire guns or drop bombs. They typed messages, sent radio transmissions, and sometimes met with handlers in neutral cafes. But their deceptions changed the course of World War II as surely as any military campaign. They proved that in modern warfare, controlling what the enemy believes can be as important as controlling what happens on the battlefield. That was the genius and legacy of MI5's double-cross system, turning Britain's greatest vulnerability, German intelligence operations against the homeland, into one of its greatest weapons, and doing it so completely that the enemy never knew they had been betrayed by every single one of their spies until long after the war was won.